first part of the installation process is to check the water pressure on both mains hot and cold water supply. A lot of people think that water pressure and water flow are the same thing. They're not. The only real way to do this is to use one of these pressure gauges. This system requires a minimum water pressure of 1.5 and a maximum water pressure of 5 bar. So what you'll see here, we've now got a water pressure reading of 3 bar, which is perfect for this type of system.
Okay, so what's next, Gav?
We're now going to install the tap.
Will it fit into any standard hole?
It does, yeah, it fits into a standard 35mm tap hole. The first part and most important thing really is when you're doing this, is to feed both mains hot and cold hose through first.
And why is that?
See the nuts on the end, if I pull it back out you can see them nuts, they're quite big. And the other ones are slightly smaller, so it's easier to feed these through first.
And what's the wire hanging down there?
So this wire here is your LED wire. So when pushing that through the hole, it's really important really that you don't damage it in any way and don't force it through.
Okay, so what hose is next?
I'm going to put the boiling through. Them last 2 hoses, there's no real preference on what one you put through first. As you can see here, the LED wires, they come all wound up, so it's quite easy sort of to push through and feed through. I'll just push that through like that. So that's all pushed through, that's all down. It's all sitting nice and flat on the surface, because I want to get underneath and tighten it up. First of all is to slide this washer over the hoses. I put the mains hot and cold hoses through first, then followed by either the boiling or the filtered. And then lastly push through the LED wire. And then slide this ring all the way up, like that. Right, this next process is just assembling this little clamp plate. Again, you have to be very careful with this and it can be quite tricky. But what you want to do is to feed the back 2 hoses into the little slot that you see there. Then the front 2 hoses, and again, being careful with the LED wire, just sliding them up. You'll then get to the position of where you engage the fixing studs and then push them through the holes in the plate. Right, next is threading these 2 brass nuts up onto these fixing studs. So what I tend to do here is just to spin the nuts up by hand and then finishing off the tightening process with this box spanner here. Included in the kit with the water boiler is a little Tommy bar. I tend to use that and push that through this little hole here as well. It gives you a bit more leverage. What I do come across as well, occasionally, when people secure taps to work surfaces, they tend to mount the tap on like an MDF backing, something like that, which for me is a massive no-no. Because what happens is that over time, the MDF moves, it then loosens the tap up. And then what people tend to do is to try and tighten it up again, but then the tap still comes loose. Right, so with the tap all secured in place, the next process now is planning out the layout underneath of what you've got in the cupboard. What I like to do is roughly position everything in place. So firstly, with the heater tank, what you need to do is to allow for 80mm gap from this top face here to about there. So like hoses don't get kinked and stuff like that.
And it's important it's not boxed in as well, Gav, yeah?
It is, yeah. So that's another thing that we've experienced in the past. If there's any maintenance that needs to be carried out on the product, what you have seen is that waste pipes and cold water feeds are all plumbed in and literally box the whole heater tank in, really. Now with the filter system, as you'll probably know, that the filter cartridge is required to be changed every 6 months. So what we like to do is to place the filter system in a nice convenient position. So what I'm going to do here today for us is sort of place this filter system around about here. The next item you've got here is the filter timer. What you need to bear in mind, wherever you do position it, that it's in a convenient place. Because what will happen is that in 6 months' time, the light will be flashing on the tap. And what you'll need to do is to reset that button to reactivate it for another 6 months again.
And the waste kit, Gav?
This goes onto the waste pipe. So again, what you need to make sure is that you've got enough height, but another real thing to really bear in mind as well, that's quite important in regard to this vent kit, which we'll go in greater detail later, but if you've got a waste disposal installed or something like that, we do recommend that the waste disposal or either the vent kit is on a separate waste pipe feed.
And it just needs to be in reach of the boiler so that you can connect that hose up.
That's it, yeah. Yeah, it's literally, so you've got a nice long hose on there that's 750mm. So it gives you plenty to play with really. Please really be aware is that don't reduce the length of this vent pipe. It's at a set length, so it's in line with all the building regulations. So what we're going to be doing here is making a connection on the cold water feed via a compression tee. And what happens at this cold water feed is the water that supplies the water filter, and then in turn the boiler as well. So what I like to do is just to eye it up, just to roughly get it into position of where you want. And what you'll see on most compression tees, there's two little ridges there and now. And what they do, they indicate the cut lines. So I can put a mark there and a mark there. Next, get my pipe cut up, just connect it into there. And obviously before you start doing this, it might be sensible to make sure you've got your water shut off. Then I just start making the cut. So what I'm going to do now is to make the connection onto the pipework using this 15mm compression tee. Some people might want to use solder joints, that's fine, that's not a problem. So when using compression fittings, a little tip, what I like to use is a tiny little bit of silicone grease just around the outside of the olive. When it comes to crunching up and tightening up the fitting, it makes the whole process a lot easier. What is important is that when making these compression connections, is please guys, don't use any sealing compounds like Boss White or PTFE tape, especially with the Boss White, because what happens is that might get flushed into the system and then potentially into the non-return valve on the heater tank that could cause a failure. The last bit of this compression tee assembly is to connect this 15mm piece of copper tube that I've pre-cut. It doesn't really matter how long you make it, but I wouldn't advise to sort of go over sort of 6 inches really. So what you need to do as well is just to bear in mind wherever you position this valve that you've got to be able to turn it on and off. So again, what I like to do is just to rotate it either way, so you give yourself plenty of room. Hand tighten these up, and once we've done that, we'll get the spanners out. And again, just repeat the same process as what we've done for these connections up here. That's all tightened, all ready to go. And what we've got here as well, guys, what I really like are these nut runners. They're absolutely great bit of kit, these are. If you see these holes here, you line them up with the front end of this nut and just push them on. Like that, yeah. What you then do is so easy. Just spin them up. You ain't got to worry faffing about with a spanner or nothing like that. Do the same with the hot water feed. Feel a little bit resistance, you know, and then your seal's in place. So now we've made this connection over here, we're going to install the filter system. So we previously determined where we're going to position this. So what you want to do is to mark out the position for your screw holes here and here. And what's quite important here, you want to leave a gap of at least sort of 3 to 4 inches to help you assist in when you change your filter cartridge. Because if you can imagine, if you've got it right down there like that, what it won't allow you to do is to unscrew the filter sump to when you change your filter cartridge. So what I like to use is to use a pilot drill hole, just to drill 2 little pilot holes to make the screwing in of this screw a lot easier. So on this instance I've just used a 1.5mm drill, but you could go up to sort of 2.5mm, you'll still be fine. What you can do as well, if you've got like a thin chipboard cabinet, you're quite welcome to put a batten on the back end of the cabinet on the other side. And that's the good thing, is that when you've piloted the hole out, you can literally just start it by hand. You don't necessarily have to tighten the screw all the way up on the filter system. If you ever want to move it out of place, you've got 2 little eyelets there and now. You can lift it up and just pull it away. What we're going to be doing here as well is using my favourite little tool again, a nut runner. Tighten it up like that.
And how do you know which one goes on there, Gav?
So what you've got on here, you've got a 1/2 inch nut on here, and with this, there's nowhere else for it to go other than on there.
So you can't get it wrong.
Exactly that, yeah. Right, the final part of the filter installation now is literally taking the last 3 ends remaining from the tap, and literally you just push it in place, and then just give it a little pull up, just to make sure it's firmly in place, and that's that done. So what we're going to do now is to secure the saddle clamp to the waste pipe. This saddle clamp is compatible with both 1.25" and 1.5" waste pipes. Today we've got 1.5" waste pipe. So what I'm going to do is unscrew this saddle clamp, and then I'm going to remove these little black bushes, which we don't need. What we do need is this little rubber O-ring. which actually fits into this little groove here. So now guys, we're going to install the saddle clamp into position. So as you can see, I've placed the O-ring there in that groove. Place that there like that, so it's nice and tight. And then place this over there like that. And then line your holes up and push your screws through. And I'm just going to go around on all 4 screw positions and just tighten up. During the tightening process, you really don't have to over-rig it. In the vent kit assembly, it's supplied this little cutter. Screw the hole cutter into the saddle clamp, keep turning it in a clockwise motion. With the hole now cut into position, into the waste pipe, I'm going to secure this little elbow. Again, you only use this elbow if you're installing the saddle clamp in the vertical position. In the horizontal position, it's not required. So I'll probably get another turn out of that. That's it, it's nice and tight. Just to see this little locking nut here, it's just to tighten that up. And what that does, it leaves the whole thing nice and rigid. What's very important is the non-return valve that this is screwed in. And with the non-return valve, it only can literally go into one position anyway. If you want to double check, you can see there's an arrow there that's pointing down, that's in line with the directional of water flow. So you've got the top part of your vent kit now, so we're just tightening this up. And again, you don't need to go nuts in tightening it. So we've got our vent hose here, and again, a way of sort of this comes in with the vent kit, but it's got a black cable tie. So what you'll see is at the next stage, that this black cable tie lines up with the black indication on the heater tank. You just tighten up this threaded connection, and we're ready to start installing the boiler. Right guys, we're now going to install the water boiler, which is nice and easy. My favourite bit really. Take the filter hose here with the green cable indicator, remove this red plastic protective cap, then place a nut runner into position. We do exactly the same for the boiling hose. Remove the little protective cap, put that nut runner in position. We then go to our water boiler. And what you'll see on the water boiler is these little, again, little protective caps. Just remove these. If you then look at the back of the tank, and what you've then got is the power cable, and attached, which is very, very important, is a little push fit elbow, which we're going to need in a minute. Undo that little tie, and then free the cable up. And then we're going to then place our boiler in position. First of all, it doesn't matter what order you do it in really. Take our push fit elbow, push it in place all the way down, and just give it a little pull back. You do exactly the same here. And what you'll see is on top of the heater tank, you've got 3 coloured dots, black, red and green. And the connections we have to make on here correspond with each colour dot. So you've got your black and your black, push down in place. You've got your red and your red. We do exactly the same with the green hose. You've got your green there and your green now. Tighten it up. You don't need to go nuts on it. Just nice and firm, like that. So what we're going to do now is to install the filter timer. Firstly, just remove this little cover here, pull it down like that. And we're going to place the batteries here. So if you just lever, get something in there just to lever the battery capsule out. Place your batteries in position. And what you will hear is that when you place the last battery in, you hear like a beep noise. There you go. So that's the start of your timer. Just place the cover back in position. What we've got here is like little Velcro pads. So what it does, you just stick it on here like this, and it enables the monitor to stick inside the cupboard. Try and position this filter timer as we did with the filter system really, in the most convenient position that you can get. Just here in place. Give it a nice firm little push, and that's it done. What we're going to do now is to install our filter cartridge. So firstly, whilst the water is all shut off, is unscrew the filter sump, which is this part here. You've then got our filter cartridge. A little tip, put a little bit of water around the O-ring. It just makes it a little bit easier for the cartridge to go into position. Literally just drop the filter cartridge into the sump. You can see it's nice and bouncy and springy. You can then just push that into place, and then screw up the sump. And again, when tightening the sump, you really don't need to over tighten it. So not gently, as you feel a bit of resistance, that's it. Now we're going to start the commissioning process. So we firstly start by turning on the mains cold and hot water. What I always do is always check for leaks around these new connections that you've made around here. And as you can see, we're looking good. And we'll then come up to our tap and then turn on the mains hot and cold water and just flush this through. Just take all the air out of the system. You can see there's still a little bit of air, which is gone. So what I recommend in new build installations where you've got new pipe work and stuff going in place is that before you flush through the mains hot and cold side, is to simply just unscrew the aerator here. You unscrew the aerator, flush the water through. Once you've done that, is then screw the aerator back in position. What this does is that what you commonly find in the new build installations, you get sort of flux and soft solder and stuff caught in the pipe work and it gets caught in the aerator. But in removing that, it just eliminates that from happening. What we're going to do now is turn on the water supply feeding the filter system. So we just rotate the handle 90 degrees and you'll hear some sort of like squealing noises and stuff like that, but it's nothing to worry about. It's just where the water is entering the filter system and the heater tank. And then what we then do is then come up to the tap, turn on the filtered water. When you first turn on the filtered water, what you'll see is that the water will go slightly black. Again, it's nothing to worry about. All that it is carbon dust residue coming from the filter system. So again, we're just flushing the filtered side through first of all, taking any air out of the system. What we're then going to do now is then flush through the boiling water side. Remove the safety clip. Then push the lever down. There's loads of air coming out of the system. Just let that flush for a minute or so. And then switch the water off. What I then like to do now is have another opportunity to just check the connections along here just to make sure there's no leaks appearing. We're all looking good there. So what we're going to do here is just to take the plug, push it into the socket, switch the power on. What we've got on here as well, again, is just some safety details, basically saying that it's important that you flush the system through with water before you switch the power on. So now we've done that, we can remove these labels and we switch the power on. If you look at the LEDs, you've got an LED at the top which is turning green, which indicates that there's power going to the unit. Then the lower LED is the coffee cup. And what you see at the moment, that lower LED is red. When the water is heated up to full temperature, that lower LED will turn green. What you will see is that towards the end of the heating cycle is over here, you'll start to see droplets of water, which is in fact condensed steam, start to appear through the tundish. Whilst the heater tank is heating up, it's a nice opportunity to use the cable ties that are supplied within the fixing kit of the tap and just to tidy some of the cables and wires up. So what you can see now, if you look at the vent, you can see it's starting to get droplets of water come out. So the heating cycle is now complete and you can see that by the lower LED here has turned green, and also another indication as well that it's complete. If you look at the vent assembly over here, you can see the water has stopped running. So what we're going to do now, guys, is commission the water boiler and flush the water through the water boiler. So we're going to turn it on, push it down and rotate it. And what you'll find first of all, you get quite a little bit of trapped air, but then the flow will settle down a little bit. So there's your trapped air. It's sort of coming out of the system. We leave the water open until you can tell that it's no longer boiling. Let the heater tank heat back up again. So what you can see now is that we've exhausted the boiling water out of the system and the flow's all settled down. And we just shut it off. We now wait another 10 minutes for the system to heat up and yeah, we'll be ready to have our first cup of tea.